So it is 7:46 on BBC Radio WM with Darren Hale. And we want to know this morning what actually is happening with the Maryhill Shopping Centre. The firm who owns the site in Brierley Hill went into administration on Friday, but the shops were still open over the weekend. Now, INTU employs about 3,000 staff across the UK, while a further 102,000 work for the store in its centres, which also include the Trafford Centre in Manchester and Lakeside in Essex. Now, the Conservative MP for Dudley South is Mike Wood. Maryhill is in his constituency, and he joins us on the programme this morning. So good morning, Mike. So did you see this coming?
Well, I mean, obviously INTU have had financial struggles for some time. They're carrying a large amount of debt. And of course, COVID hasn't caused those problems, but it's certainly been a trigger that I think has brought things to this point.
Now, you've been really active on social media over the weekend, talking about the need for a buyer to come forward as soon as possible. But is a shopping centre an attractive proposition for anyone to buy in the current climate, Mike?
Well, it's obviously a very difficult time for retail, but I think many of the centres that INTU run, and particularly Maryhill and obviously Lakeside and the Trafford Centre in Manchester, I think do have very strong commercial foundations. And so I think they will be attractive, whether somebody buys the company as a whole or whether they split off the more profitable centres, I don't know. But obviously, speaking as a constituency MP representing Dudley South, obviously my top priority is to make sure that the right buyer can be found for Maryhill, to make sure that the investment that INTU have put into that centre over the past few years can continue, and particularly that the Midland Metro tram extension to Brierley Hill that really relies on Maryhill and the waterfront, that continues, that our local enterprise zone at the waterfront can succeed and grow and employ more people. So we need a buyer that's going to support that, as well as support the thousands of retail jobs at the centre.
Well, you've mentioned the thousands of jobs, and there'll be people listening this morning, possibly now on the way into work at Maryhill, a lot of them with families as well. So what can you say to reassure them this morning, Mike?
Well, my brother starts a job at one of the shops at Maryhill this morning. It's his first day at work after a lengthy period out of work. And so, of course, this is worrying time for him as well as, for the thousands of others. There was a point last week where we were really worried that the shops were going to have to close whilst they sought a new buyer. I was talking to ministers at the end of last week. They've been in regular contact with INTU and really pleased that they found a solution that meant the shops can stay open, the people can stay in work, and can have an orderly process to find a buyer whilst the shops are still trading.
If it did shut, God forbid, what would that mean for the Black Country?
Well, I mean, it would obviously, be thousands of people out of work at really the worst possible time when we've just had the biggest economic shock probably in 300 years to the British economy. It's obviously in terms of Dudley, a massive retail centre, massive piece of land that would be out of operation. But I think there will be a buyer. Those shops are fundamentally sound. The operation's fundamentally sound, and the work and the investment that INTU have been putting it in, I think, does prepare it for actually a good future. And some of the plans that INTU had for that centre with the extra development, obviously they've just reconfigured the bus station, the tram station will be coming to the centre. I think that's due in 3 years, making it a centre for local transport as well as for local retail and local leisure, with hopefully a new cinema complex there as well. Does mean that it is a centre that could be growing rather than closing. So hopefully we won't get to a position where it has to close even temporarily, but we do need that buyer, whether that's an acquisition for INTU as a whole or whether they sell off the assets separately like Maryhill, which I say is a profitable and successful centre.
Yeah. Can you do any more, Mike? I mean, you've gone on social media, you've come on here this morning, and you're saying, we need someone to buy it. What could you do anymore? Could the government do anything?
Well, I was talking to the Business and Industry Minister at the end of last week to see obviously what they can do, and whilst there was not a lot directly because of the scale of the debt and challenges facing INTU. It was going to need an enormous amount of lending and then hope that things picked up. I think where we are now, it's obviously just working with INTU to make sure that whether it's companies like operate, obviously the Bullring, Birmingham Central is the obvious one. There was obviously talks of a takeover a couple of years ago that didn't quite happen at that point, but obviously we're now in the circumstances they may be a potential buyer. There are other potential developers, shopping centre operators around the country who may be interested, as I say, particularly in the big, high-profile, profitable centres like Maryhill, Lakeside Down, South Trafford Centre in Manchester.
So, but you're confident that they will find a buyer, and in the meantime, then at least it's going to stay open for now anyway, and that's got to be a positive, hasn't it?
That's right. So it protects the jobs there. It means that people can still be shopping. I was there at the start of last week, and whilst most people were behaving very responsibly, it was good to see people back into the centre, obviously after 3 months where it was only really Asda and the food hall that were open. And so whilst it's really important, of course, that we support our high streets and town centres, Maryhill is by far the biggest source of employment in my constituency. It's so important to our local economy. We need it to succeed, and that means that now we need somebody to come in. It needs to be the right people coming in to buy it and give it the strong future that's going to protect those jobs and prosperity that we need.
Mike Wood, Conservative MP for Dudley South, thanks for your time this morning, just reacting to the news that the INTU Maryhill Shopping Centre went into administration over the weekend.